Now, one of the things that you've been researching are what you call sleep onset microdreaming. And I'm not sure what that is. You can tell us about it. To me, it sounds reminiscent of what I know as the hypnagogic state. Is another term, a more scientific term for the hypnagogic?
Well, yes, it's an area that's still kind of in flux. There's been a kind of a detour away from studying, cognition in that hypnagogic state. But my idea of microdreaming was an attempt to alert people to the fact that that it's possible to study dreaming at the very instant that you're falling asleep, not during this drawn out sort of 10-minute sleep onset period, which we all go through when we fall asleep at night, but rather it's that phenomenon where you're sitting in a chair and you're sleepy, and then suddenly your head nods forward because you just lost it for a second.
Yeah,
that's what a microdream is. It's the imagery that occurs at that instant that your head is falling forward. And I mean, this is what Salvador Dali used in his sort of paranoid method of surrealistic art. Thomas Edison developed methods of using that instant of sleep onset. It's very rich. It's very rich. A single image, as you know, it's worth 1,000 words. But a sleep onset image at that point, it's not static in my experience. It's dynamic. It involves motion. It's as if you are seeing a short clip from a video of perhaps a second in duration, that you start arbitrarily right in the middle of a movement, and that you end very often at the end of a sort of a ballistic kind of movement, like, I was throwing a ball and I wake up and my hand actually flies off into the air,
right?
Or I'm falling into a vat of something, and I wake up just as my head falls forward. It's a clip, and that's worth 10 times 1,000 words. I've been collecting those systematically and trying to describe them. They're really extensive descriptions. Some of them really long and involved. If you take the job of phenomenology seriously and try to describe everything.
Well, in my doctoral study, my third year paper was on altered states of consciousness. Charles Tart's book came out around that same time, and it was very exciting to me. Yeah. And so probably some of these ideas came from his book and other sources that I found, that there were people who developed the skill to stay in that state rather than to stay in lucidity. I'm not sure what the difference is really, but to stay in that, and they found it to be another world would open up to them. There's Swedenborg. I was blocking on his name. I think Tart talked about, Swedenborg, who developed a whole hierarchy of angels and devils and so on that he experienced in that state. And this was a guy who was very bright, and we're told he was a successful politician and writer and scientist and so on. And so I've been intrigued with that state. And a personal experience that I've been having is my wife and I watch TV in the evening together, but I'm very sleepy after I've had dinner. And so I'm watching the show and I'm moving in and out of the show, and I'm having little, what I think would be these micro dreams,
right?
In which it's like I'm interacting with the show, or I'm taking the plot in a slightly different direction.
Oh, I absolutely understand what you're talking about. Is no, really. I mean, you can have the same experience reading. Very often, you're following a narrative, and then your eyes start to get tired, and you might start to hallucinate that the letters change colors. Very often, red and green in my case, and sometimes I even dream a different twist in the plot just for a few seconds.
That's what's happening to me.
What I'm trying to do, this was something that Symbolic, a neo-psychoanalytic researcher, I'll call him a researcher, was trying to exploit. He discovered that very often the thoughts that were going through our minds at the moment that we fell asleep would be reflected in the images. And he called this auto-symbolic imagery, in that the dream was taking that concept or whatever, and turning it into a visual image. And so he gave examples of, one that comes to mind is that he was trying to correct in his mind a halting sentence in a text he was writing, and he suddenly had an image where he's planing a board. Okay, he's trying to smooth out the board with this plane, which is sort of metaphorically what he was trying to do with his writing. Anyway, the auto-symbolic idea really affected me. And lately I have started trying to prove that his ideas were right, in that this could be exploited as an experimental technique. Because he claimed it, but he never really proved it. And it's always possible that the idea and the dream were both springing out of the same sort of unconscious narrative. So in order for it to be experimental, you have to, intentionally choose something to try to stimulate a dream. And this is what I've been doing. I've collected hundreds of dreams now where I am falling asleep and I intentionally think of something as I'm falling asleep. And then as soon as I have an image, I record the image and look for associations between what I call the stimulus. And it works surprisingly well.
So you're experimenting on yourself.
Yes.
N of one, yeah.
N of one. And of course, you have to be very skeptical. But I mean, when you think of it, dreams are accessible only to N of one. You cannot see another person's dreams, at least not yet. You can't. And I don't know if we ever will be able to. So it is an introspective exercise. And you need to, I think, take a skeptical scientific approach to avoid a lot of the biases that people naturally have and aren't aware of. So, I'm doing this myself. It works like a charm for me, but for others, it might be quite different. Other people might not even be able to experience these instances of imagery at sleep onset, or they might fall into a state.
Yeah. Does this touch on the area where there are these stories about Einstein and Robert Louis Stevenson and other people who have a flash that turns into, the theory of relativity, or Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's story, and so on. And they're just all of these examples that people have compiled.